lengthy imprisonments, and numerous exiles. And when he passed away in 1892, he appointed his son Abdul-Baha as his successor. Now, Baha'is understand Abdul-Baha to be the perfect exemplar of Baha'u'llah's teachings. And through his supreme example, we are able to direct our thoughts and our actions, bring them into alignment with the world of grace and vision that Baha'u'llah brought forth. It is in this attitude of humble learning that I would like to share with you a few examples of Abdul-Baha's compassion. For many years, he was imprisoned in the city fortress of Akka. To the inhabitants, he was known as the father of the poor. One man who contracted tuberculosis was immediately shunned by his family and abandoned by his friends. But when Abdul-Baha heard about this, he immediately went to this man's house and took care of him. He visited him daily, spoke with him, brought him delicacies, and was with him when he died. Another time, Abdul-Baha's wife kindly tried to urge him to buy a new coat because he was having a meeting with a city official. And Abdul-Baha kindly but firmly said no, because that one coat could buy 10 simple coats for those who are in need. These are simple stories, but this is how Abdul-Baha lives his life and how we are encouraged as well. But despite his compassion for others, there were some that still held Abdul-Baha in resentment. In Akka, there was one such man who would go out of his way to cause Abdul-Baha embarrassment and humiliation. He would defile Abdul-Baha's character in public. If he chanced upon him on the streets, he would lift up his jacket to hide his eyes so he would not have eye contact with Abdul-Baha. That enough right there, I'm sure, is touching your heart. But then I will tell you that this behavior went on for 24 years. And Abdul-Baha always treated this man with kindness. He would send medicine to this man's home and his family, and send food if the man was in need. And it happened that one day, after these 24 years, that the man and Abdul-Baha were walking towards each other down a very narrow alleyway. It was impossible for the man to avoid Abdul-Baha. Just as he was about to go by, Abdul-Baha stopped him and he said, "No matter how great your hatred for me, it will never equal my love for you." Abdul-Baha's extraordinary compassion was not only inspired by Baha'u'llah's teachings, but also by the life of Baha'u'llah. And the final story I will share with you is an account of Baha'u'llah's compassion. During one of his imprisonments, Baha'u'llah was being paraded through the streets in a very disgraceful manner, and it was meant to show the people that this is an infidel, this is an unbeliever. And many of the bystanders went and gathered stones and rocks to throw at Baha'u'llah because they believed him to be this criminal. And as Baha'u'llah was being paraded through the streets, he was aware that there was an elderly woman far behind the crowd, and she was carrying a very heavy stone. And he knew that in her heart she believed that what she was doing was a righteous act, an honorable act. So he asked the guards to slow down, to wait, so that she could catch up and throw the stone at him, because that was her duty. When I hear these stories, that a manifestation of God, as we understand him to be, would put himself in such a position for another human being to accept that kind of humiliation, that kind of degradation, is very inspiring. Something that maybe I could never achieve, but as I read these stories and as I'm able to share them with you, I think that this is the kind of gathering where we can change the world, where we can bring our religions closer together and see the similarities between them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next storyteller, representing the Buddhist tradition, is Dr. Michael Ling. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I have to say, I feel like a little bit like a water buffalo in a field of gazelles in this good company here. And if you'll permit me, Karen, maybe online, yes, there. Nothing you're jumping on this gazelle fan. Graceful, gracious lioness. I often like to say at best I'm a B- Buddhist. I was introduced to Buddhism by a teacher many, many years ago in my 20s, and I'm in my mid-50s now. I've tried in my way to embody and follow the practices and ideals, but I fail miserably. So I wanted to put that out there at the outset. In Buddhism, some of you may be aware, there's a core of it is the idea of compassion and wisdom coming together. The idea of wisdom in compassion, compassion in wisdom. The core tenet of all the schools of Buddhism that I'm familiar with. And in the oldest of the traditions, the Theravada tradition, there are a series of meditations that are very much centered around the whole idea of compassion in various kind of iterations. And they're called the Brahma Vihara, the divine abidings. And I've always liked that notion of an abiding, that these things are intended for us to inhabit them, or to do our best to inhabit them, and to inhabit them as best as we can. And the divine abidings are four of them. There's loving kindness, sympathetic joy, serenity, and compassion itself. And what I want to share with you is actually a very personal story about how I have actually been challenged by this. Because I think, for me, the whole idea of compassion is both a question and a challenge. It's a question in terms of defining for ourselves and in conversation with others what exactly is compassion, and a challenge in terms of how can I embody it, as Karen reminded us, in every day and in the daily living of life. So the story I want to share with you actually goes back to when I was very, very young. About 10 years old. My father started traveling. He worked for the United Nations actually, and traveled all over the world. And so I would periodically get postcards from him with letters, and I would meticulously, well, not meticulously, I would devotedly tear off the stamps from these postcards and letters that I'd get from him. I was not a fastidious stamp collector. Some of you may be, and I greatly admire that. For me, I was just ripping them off, and little edges of postcards and fragments of scenes of little white paper and blue paper around these stamps. And I would keep them in a transistor radio that I had. Those of you who are my age will remember what a transistor radio was. We live in the world of iPods and nanos, so it's a different thing. The transistor radios often had a very cool leather cover to them, and this leather cover became my receptacle for storing these stamps. My father and my mother split up when I was about 15 years old. And so I collected these stamps over a number of years, and he continued his travels all over the world. And over the years, we actually became quite estranged, to tell you the truth. But occasionally I would get these stamps periodically of places he'd been to, etc., etc. And I kept collecting them. But as I say, we were quite estranged. For about 30 years, in fact. My father passed away 2 years ago. And as I was going through his effects, photographs, letters, and lectures that he's given, and awards that he's received, I found envelopes and envelopes and envelopes of stamps that he had collected. And what was really interesting about that for me is, for those 30 years, I had felt, very justified and emboldened. Oh, he was out in the world living his life, being an acknowledged expert in his field with others, but he had no time for his family. And I felt very justified in, gathering armor around myself to justify that and justify my feelings and why I should be estranged from him. When I found those stamps, those envelopes and envelopes of stamps, it was like having a mirror held up to me. And I was able to see him as a human, with all his frailties, with his complexities, with his sufferings, and with his enthusiasms. And I think that was a key part of it, seeing his enthusiasms, and how stark a mirror could it be that he had done the very thing that I had done. So again, I look at the idea of compassion as both a question and a challenge, and again, thank you, Karen, for reminding us that it's something we have to try daily, even though as I feel about myself, I fail more often, or I stumble and fail more often than I succeed. But I'm grateful for these kind of gatherings to keep me on track, so thank you. Thank you very much.
socks. A few years ago when I was teaching in Toronto, I had a student named Ted, nothing to do with the prize, Karen, and that isn't his real name. Ted was and is a fine preacher and a fact relevant to the story, a tall man. That winter, though Ted was still a student, he was preaching in a church temporarily without a minister, located in a small Ontario city, but nevertheless large enough to have a downtown and the problems often associated with downtowns. One Sunday, following a bitterly cold Saturday night, Ted was sitting in the minister's empty study, putting the final touches on his sermon. Just then, a church lady, the kind they used to parody on Saturday Night Live, bustled in, looking both agitated and determined. Ted, there's a homeless person in the church and he stinks. You're a big man, and I want you to come and throw him out. Well, those of you who know church ladies know that they can be difficult to say no to, especially if they are agitated. So Ted decided to follow her into the church. Ted followed the church lady into the sanctuary, and sure enough, there was indeed a homeless person in the front pew. And she was played right. He did stink. He smelled as if he'd passed the night in a dumpster, which, when you think about it, was probably exactly what he had done. His clothes were shabby and stained, and his shoes were cracked and down-heeled. Worst of all, in that bitter Ontario winter, he had no socks, and his ankles were blue with the cold. It happened, and this too is relevant to the story, that Ted's sermon that day was to be drawn from Jesus' parable of the final judgment. In that parable, the righteous come before the master, and he says, "Welcome, beloved. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Now the righteous are bewildered by these words, and they reply, "But when did we see you hungry, or naked, or in prison?" And the master replies, "Inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, my brothers and my sisters, you've done it unto me." Now, when the unrighteous come before the master, of course, he says, but you can probably work out the rest for yourself. So, when Ted looked at the homeless man, it was as if he could hear the master saying to him personally, "I had no socks, and my ankles were blue with the cold, and you threw me out in the frozen winter." He was just working up the courage to say no to the church lady when he realized that she was not the only kind of church lady in that congregation. Another very different church lady had fixed some sandwiches for the man. The chief elder of the church was sitting beside the man in the front pew and conversing with him, almost as if he were a human being and an honored guest in their church. Best of all, Ted told me, a small girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, came up to the homeless man and handed him a pair of rolled up men's socks. "Ted," I said, "that's a wonderful story. May I use it?" "Surely," he replied politely. Students are normally polite to their professors. But even as I asked, I realized there was one little detail that I didn't get. I didn't understand it, and I do like to get the details right if I'm going to tell a story. Where did the socks come from? Is there a clothes closet for the needy in that congregation? Many churches, especially in downtown locations, collect clothes for the needy, and perhaps there was a supply, including socks, on hand. That would explain it. "No, there isn't," said Ted, "and I don't know where the socks came from." Now, I don't know where the socks came from either, but here's a guess. It's the only answer I can imagine, but it's still just a guess. I think the little girl got the socks from her father. I mean, where else could she find them? I think there was in that church a little girl with compassion in her heart. And a very proud father with a warm heart and cold feet.
A story from the Hindu tradition, Dr. Gira Bhatt.
Thank you so much for inviting me here, and I feel truly honored. The concept of compassion in Hinduism is captured by the term karuna. It's a Sanskrit term, not easy to translate. For it's not just an act of compassion, it's not just a feeling of compassion, it's not just a thought of compassion. It transcends all of that. So the story that I have chosen to share with you today perhaps will convey what karuna or compassion stands for in Hinduism. Story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a king. He was a good king. His land was prosperous. His people were happy. But one season, the monsoons never arrived, so the drought followed. Inspired by compassion, witnessing the plight of people around, he opened up his palace, the royal granary, the royal kitchen, the royal water wells, and he kept giving to the people. Next year came by, but there was no rain. Another rain season came by, no rain. The plight of the people was worsening. He kept giving and giving and giving. There was dryness all around. The lands were dry, the rivers were dry, the lakes were dry, and there was no hope, it seemed. People were dying or leaving. And at one time, the king, whose name was Rantidev, he had nothing left. So like everyone else, he also had to leave and start wandering around. So Rantidev, the king, is now a wanderer. 48 days have passed. He hasn't eaten any food. On the 49th day, he's listless and finally almost collapses under a dry tree. Darkness falls and he falls asleep. Then he hears a ruffle around him and he wakes up and he sees around and somebody has left some food for him and a small jar of water. So he wakes up, says his prayer, and then gathers the food, but before he could put a morsel in his mouth, out of nowhere, a Brahmin appears. Brahmin is an upper caste man, scholarly man. He looks at him and says, "You are the king Rantidev. I've heard about your karuna. I'm very hungry." Without thinking even for a moment, Rantidev immediately shared what little food he had, shares it half with the Brahmin. The Brahmin blesses him and goes away. Now again Rantidev gathers the little food that was left for himself, tries to eat that. Another man shows up, scruffy looking, with a dog, and he looks at him and says, "I'm very hungry. Do you think I can have some food?" Again Rantidev. Now he'd been hungry for 8 days, yet he shares it with this man. The man says, "Well, what about my dog? He's very emaciated. He needs some water." And so Rantidev just gives him the jar of water. The dog drinks almost all of it, leaving just few drops behind. And now just 1 or 2 small morsels are left, and Rantidev tries to eat it. Another man shows up, poor beggarly man. Rantidev gives it all to him, even with few drops of water. Now he's got nothing left. And he knows his end is near, so he starts to meditate, waiting for his death. With his eyes closed, suddenly, this total brightness all around him, and he's dazzled by it. He opens his eyes. And then in front of him appears 3 divine deities. And you have to grow up in India to understand the plurality of gods. They're like all kinds of gods. So these 3 gods, the divine gods, appear in front of him, and he recognizes them. The first one is Indra Raja. He is the king of heavens. The second one is Yamaraja with his dog, and he is the king of death. And the third one is Brahma, the creator of the universe. They all smile at him and say that, Ranti Dev, we have never ever seen anyone showing so much karuna, the compassion that you have shown. Therefore, we wish to grant you a boon. Now this is where, as kids growing up in India, it gets very excited because now the gods are there and what is he going to ask? And so a lot of excitement for kids. And so Ranti Dev looks at them, pays his respect to them, and there's a beautiful Sanskrit hymn about it. But these gods, they say, because Ranti Dev is not saying anything yet. So they say, Mang, Jai Mage Te Aku. This is an expression as kids, we used to love that, part of many stories. What it means is, ask, whatever you ask shall be granted. And so you wait, what is he going to ask now? So Ranti Dev again says this beautiful Sanskrit hymn, and what it means is, he looks at Indra Raja, the king of heavens, and he tells him, why would I need heavens? All you provide in the heavens are sensuous pleasures, beautiful things to see for my eyes, beautiful music for my ears, beautiful fragrances for my nose, beautiful heavenly maidens for my pleasures, but that's all sensuous pleasure. Then he looks at Yamaraja, the king of death, and he says, why would I want salvation? Because salvation is only for my own soul. My own soul will be freed from the cycle of birth and death. And then he looks at Brahma, the god of creation, and he says that, I do want to ask you something. What I want is freedom from suffering for all other beings. For that has inspired karuna in me, and this karuna has sustained me through all my hard times, and this is the karuna that has provided me the eternal source of bliss. I seek no more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, representing the tradition of Islam, Mehrun Adani.
Thank you very much for the invitation today. I'm very honored and humbled to be here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah, God, be with you. As a Muslim storyteller, it's important for me to say, I'm not a religious scholar. I'm not well versed in the Quran. I don't speak Arabic. And I'm not the voice of all Muslims. I speak from my heart, my life experience, with one question. What does compassion really mean for me as a Muslim? I had an epiphany, and it's wonderful that I'm in the church, this chapel of Epiphany, many weeks ago. I went to do my poetry reading. I'm a published poet. I automatically recited under my breath, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim means mercy, compassion, kindness, and gentleness. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are the two names of Allah, God, and emphasize the one, God, is the most compassionate and most merciful, and also shows a lot of compassion or mercy to all beings. Like myself, Muslims all over the world often say Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim before doing anything such as eating, sleeping, praying, before reading a chapter of the Quran, before leaving home. I even say it when I'm afraid or nervous like today, or encounter obstacles. The one line is so powerful to me. It's woven all day, every day, into the lives of Muslims. For me, this line goes further than God's compassion and mercy. It is also a reminder about compassion or mercy to myself. It's interesting that it's so automatic for me that I forgot about the meaning until today. So I'm going to talk about two very brief personal stories. The first one is compassion for others, and the second one is compassion to myself. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I first experienced racism and bullying when I was 8 years old, and throughout my childhood, I continued to experience that. By the time I reached my 20s, I searched for my community so I could fit in. And it was very difficult. I didn't fit in quite so easily. I became a strong activist against colonialism, racism, sexism, and violence experienced specifically by South Asian Muslim women. I retained a lot of anger in my 20s. I basically thought all white people were racist. I blamed men for all the violence in the world. But I soon began to see that that anger began to consume me. And I specifically saw this in some of my activist allies and in myself when I experienced from a professor a racialized comment in class. And it was her mistake. And what I did right away was, I was angry, but I went to her and opened up a conversation. And through that conversation, we both learned our own mistake. And we talked with each other about the impact of the action that we each had. A year later, she died of cancer. When we had our personal conversation, we also both forgave each other. So when she died of cancer a year later, I went to her memorial, and I was so grateful that I had that conversation with her. I realized at that moment I let go of that anger. I also immersed myself into different communities, religions, and sectors, and traveled so many places. In the end, I learned that negative behavior exists in all of us, and we're all capable of negative actions, even me. Through dialogue and spirituality, I found compassion and forgiveness towards others. My second very short story is about myself. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Find the courage to be compassionate to oneself, courage to make mistakes, admit one's own mistakes, and then move on. This is step 3 of the 12 steps to a compassionate life, which I've been reading all the steps. And I didn't get blocked by that step 3. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Through the 10 years, I drove myself incredibly hard in my career. 24/7 I worked to fight racism. There was no way I was going to let this illness bring me down. And I was going to keep fighting and doing what I can to move forward. On the one hand, I accepted having MS, ignored it, and moved forward. On the other hand, the pressure, the stress I put myself under inadvertently affected my health and my outlook on life. I forgot about love and compassion towards myself and others. Khan says in her book, if you're overly hard on yourself, you're likely to be hard on others. I was definitely both. In this hard journey, I realized a lot, but most importantly, I realized there is no shame in having MS or in my physically challenged Muslim identity. My self-worth is intact, and moving forward is to continue looking after myself first so I can continue to look after others. So I come back to my question, what does compassion mean to me as a Muslim? It means don't pass judgment. Approach each person with an open mind and through dialogue. If you're a person dealing with a barrier, don't hurt yourself in trying so hard to fit in. Be patient. Ask for help. Find your courage, your voice. You'll be surprised to know how accepted you are and the help you receive. Realize your worth and potential, especially when someone puts you down, whether it's through racism, sexism, bullying, homophobia, a physical disability, or whatever you might be dealing with. Finally, compassion is also admitting, I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, and at times I have failed. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim has existed for me all along. I needed this reminder today. I am an interfaith Muslim who believes the divine is in me, in you, and everywhere. We are all capable of compassion. We just need to do it. I close with a quote from Rumi, a Sufi poet and scholar. Listen with ears of tolerance. See through the eyes of compassion. Speak with the language of love.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And now, representing the tradition of Judaism, Maguda Shoshana Litvin.
I'm going to stand here. Does this work? Yeah, okay. Shalom Aleichem. We are encouraged to be gentle, like Hillel, you mentioned, and not impatient, like Shammai. A young Roman man came to Hillel and said, standing on one foot, listen close, because I'm going to get you to do this in just a second. Tell me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot! Have you ever felt like that in school? So everybody, get up. If you can't, no worries. Just say it from where you are. And say, with feeling, tell me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot! Okay. The same man, oh, and then you know what Shammai does? He chases him off with a measuring stick, wouldn't you? Maybe not. Maybe you have more compassion. This man, same man, goes to Hillel and says, everybody, tell me the entire Torah while I stand on my foot. And Hillel says, fine. What is painful to you, don't do to others. All the rest is commentary. That is the entire Torah. Now, go learn. What Hillel had done is he had taken 3 words from our Torah, he paraphrased them because he thought maybe this Roman gentleman isn't ready to love others, but perhaps he could refrain from hurting them. But this is what we are given to do. It's in the book of Leviticus, which we know as Vayikra, 3rd book of the 5 books of Moses. We just started reading it last week. Chapter 19, line 18, it says, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love others, and you shall love others as yourself. Now, obviously, Shammai had trouble doing this. You can't do it all the time. But one simple way, he said, is to smile at people, is to help people, is to reach out, is to think of them before yourself. And of course, you do have to love yourself in order to overflow to love others. Yeah, you have to go through that 3rd step. It's heavy. But you have to keep moving and be there for people, right? So we learn through doing. We're a religion of action, but we also learn by study. And you study one-on-one in Karutas, you study in a group of Baha'i, and you also learn by reading and learning, and you chant. It's called Hispaus. That means speaking with lips of flame. And that's a good way to get this all to go past your intellect into your soul and your heart and your kitchen. It's really live it, so that when you're faced with a difficult situation, you make the right choice. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to give you a tune, because a wordless tune is even better for getting past your intellect. And I'm going to teach you a couple notes from the Torah, the way the Torah is chanted in synagogues all over the world. One note is Pashta, goes like this. Pashta. And then every sentence is ended this way. So, pasuk. But we're going to sing it as a wordless tune. And make it. It's way easy. So just repeat after me. La la. La la. And then again. La la. La la. La la. Beautiful. We'll put it all together. La la. La la. The words are, just repeat them after me without yourself.
And you shall love others as yourself.
Yeah, okay, and that's how we'll sing it. And you shall love.
And you shall love
others. As yourself.
as yourself.
Let's put it all together 3 times. You say if you sing something 3 times, it's yours. So here we go. And you shall love others as yourself. I mean it. And you shall love others as yourself. Healing. And you shall love others as yourself. Should we try in Hebrew? Okay. Now in Hebrew we have to practice this sound. Some will know because their language has this sound. That's this letter right here. And tiny in white. So try. Got it. Okay. Here we go. Ve'ahavta. L'reacha. Kamocha. And we'll sing it like this, word by word. Ve'ahavta. L'reacha.
Sikh tradition, Balbinder Shurla.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the organizers realize how dangerous it is to give a lawyer a podium. So I'm going to move over here just a tad to make it a bit easier for you to hear me. First of all, I'm very honored to be standing here on Musqueam land in a very holy, spiritual place with the chief, Ms. Armstrong, and various team speakers and all of you. What I want to share with you today is a very short story with a very brief history, because Sikhism isn't a very old religion. There are so many things that I can tell, and I gather that for most of you, Sikhism is something that you've likely only heard of in brief descriptions, usually attached with Sikh man, Kirpan, violent, terrorist, all of those sorts of things. And so I want to show you a little insight into who I am and why I am who I am. So around the time that Columbus was busy sailing the ocean blue, and the English were still on that mission to find spices that jazz up that British food, there was born a man in northern Punjab, 1469. And his name was Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak, through the childhood that he grew up and was raised as a Hindu. But he had a spiritual epiphany experience, enlightenment, whatever we all wish to call it in our own language, where he came to realize very quickly that the social divisions, that the pain that was caused by humanity was often caused by religion. That often religious divisions were at the heart and the root of almost every single kind of inhumane behavior that he witnessed through his childhood. But now I'm going to tell a little snippet of a story that I like to call The Lion, the Sikh, and the Wardrobe. Another true story. So Guru Nanak Bahadur was beheaded, and his body was recovered in one place, and his head was recovered by some people gathered around. It was a great gathering. And ultimately, a Sikh managed to go all the way to Anandpur, where his son still was. And his wife, or the mother's wife, was still there. And said, we've managed to recover part of the body, but we haven't been able to recover the rest. And Guru Gobind Singh said, well, what happened to the rest? He said, well, we just weren't able to recover it. And he said, well, weren't there other Sikhs there? He said, I couldn't tell. Couldn't tell the difference between a Sikh and a Muslim and a Hindu. They were all gathered around together and they all looked the same to me, so I didn't know who to turn to for help. So I managed to escape with part of the body, but I wasn't able to have any help in getting the rest. So the Guru Baha'i came up with an idea. And the idea, and Guru Gobind Singh, I'm sorry. And the idea was this, that he wanted to have instilled in a people the courage to stand up against injustice, the courage to be prepared to put up or shut up. And so what he did was on 1699, Vaisakhi, and Vaisakhi celebration is just around the corner, April the 14th actually. On the day of Vaisakhi, there was a large gathering, and at that gathering he called forward thousands of people. And he started the very first initiation ceremony into Sikhism. And the ceremony resulted in the creation of a separate Sikh identity. And so the separate Sikh identity was, first of all, the taking of a last name by all women, or by all men, Singh, meaning lion. Lion or lioness. Meaning that a Sikh should have the courage of a lion to stand up against injustice. But it went beyond that. Every Sikh who committed themselves to becoming a Sikh would then agree and would then wear or carry with them 5 articles of faith. Each one of them designed for that Sikh to have an outward reflection of our identity so that no one in this gathering or anywhere else would be able to go home and say, I didn't see any Sikhs because I don't really know what they look like. Well, you kind of all know what I look like. Mine's the beard. And so the 5 articles of faith, and I'm going to quickly snap into those because I'm mindful of the time. The first was the steel bangle that you see on my wrist. The circle symbolizes for us the unity of creation. That our Creator is never born, never dies. Our soul is never born and never dies. And so every time I lift my hand, I lift it up to do good things, not bad. A second article of faith, Gashara, which is cotton underwear, essentially reminding me at all times chastity, not only to be faithful to my spouse, but to be faithful to myself. And then Kakish, which is unshorn hair, to keep my hair long as a way of respecting creation, respecting the identity that I have been created with. So you will see Sikh men and women with long hair that they don't cut. And a comb, Ganga, which we use to clean our hair, to remind us that every morning when we get dressed, that as we get dressed, not only are we cleansing our bodies, but cleansing our minds spiritually. The Gurban, which of course many of you have heard of, which for a Sikh, the word actually Kirpa means compassion, magnanimity. And the Gurban is in the shape of a sword, and we wear this on our person at all times. And it reminds the wearer to always stand up against injustice wherever you see it, to defend the defenseless. The turban, which you will readily see, was the lifting of the veil. The Supreme Being is our Creator, and both men and women, as a sign of humility, would cover their heads before our Creator who's everywhere. And so the turban was a covering and a reminder of the fundamental equality between men and women. And so the lion, the Singh, the Sikh, Guru Gobind Singh, and the wardrobe that you see were a culmination of an idea that every single human being needs to be able to practice their faith, put it into action. Not to just believe a set of beliefs, to put them into action. So I'm going to do a very quick little short fast forward. Last year, many of you might have heard, there were going to be hearings on the niqab in Montreal. And the issue was that Muslim women were going to be banned, prevented from covering their faces in public. Now, as you've already heard, Sikhism, that doesn't jive with my spiritual teachings. But the organization that I've been volunteering with during my entire legal career, the World Sikh Organization, believed that it was our obligation to stand up for those women, irrespective of whether their beliefs were different than ours. And so we sent a delegation of 4 individuals to go to Quebec's National Assembly to make a presentation. And the purpose of that was to be able to speak on the issue of compassion and the fact that we must allow people to freely practice their faith, and if we cannot do that in this country, then where else can we do that? But as you know, and as the story goes, the very irony of life, those Sikhs were not permitted to enter the Quebec National Assembly because they were wearing their gurbans. The very article of faith that enjoins me at all times to stand up against injustice, that enjoined me to speak up on behalf of those women, was the very reason why my colleagues were not permitted to enter the Quebec National Assembly. It's one of those things, and so I leave you with this. It is not enough for us to come to feel-good seminars, to sign up with charters and feel great, as Karen has said. It's not enough to just do that. We must put action. Religions at the base of them are designed to create spiritually conscious, socially responsible, and socially active human beings. I wish you well on your journey. Thank you.
Two of them will be here. If you have a pink circle on your name tag by a quirk of faith, it turns out that there are 2 groups that have a pink circle symbol, and they shouldn't. So there is a woman standing toward the back, my colleague, Dr. Rosa Sevi, standing right there. She's waving her hand. Do you see her? There she is. And she's our postdoctoral fellow and program coordinator. She will help you, if you're in a pink circle group, to find out where you're supposed to go. There also are people in the lobby right out here and in the lobby of the main building. There are charts on the walls that tells you where your group goes. Okay? But the pink circle groups are going to have to be sorted out. There are 2 different groups, and they can tell you which one you're in. If you did not get assigned a group because you were not pre-registered and we were able to find space for you, there are a few of you who don't have a group. And our soon-to-be research affiliate, Shiva Oye, PhD candidate, waving her hand. You see her there? She is going to tell you in which group you are going to be having lunch and conversation. Okay? Your group facilitators know the schedule and instructions. Thank you all. We will see you back here at 1:15.